NASDAQ getting hit today. NVIDIA taking the brunt of it, down more than 3%. And now it could be facing some new competition as chip startup Cerebras files for IPO. Our Seema Modi's on the story for today's Tech Check. Hey, Seema.
Carl, Cerebras is backed by some of the biggest names in tech, Coatue, Benchmark, Altimeter Capital. It designs artificial intelligence chips for inference that its CEO, Andrew Feldman, an ex-AMD executive, says are cheaper than NVIDIA and AMD's. And unlike the industry's obsession with smaller chips, Cerebras wafers are over 50 times larger than its rivals, which Feldman told us helps speed up processing. Now, amid this AI boom, the company's S1 revealing growth is accelerating with an over 200% jump in 2023 sales, though not profitable. Some of the customers include GlaxoSmithKline, the U.S. government, and a conglomerate in the UAE named G42 that makes up a majority of its revenue, 87% of sales in the first half of this year. The S1 also noting that the dependence on its relationship with G42 opens it up to a number of risks, like changes in demand from the state-backed tech company or changes in regulation. Now, it's no small feat, of course, going up against a company like NVIDIA, the dominant player in AI chips, and there's a high switching cost. That's why Wall Street analysts say the big question is whether Cerebras can secure a large order from a hyperscaler that currently uses some of the bigger names like NVIDIA to build their AI models. Similar to NVIDIA and the rest, Cerebras does fab its chips with Taiwan Semiconductor. Now, I'm told a 5-year-old semiconductor company plans to go public this fall, targeting a valuation of $7 to $10 billion. Some investors in the private tech market are optimistic that this could open up a new wave of AI IPOs. Cerebras would be one of the first companies to debut from one of the many AI startups cropping up in this new era. How investors, of course, receive it in the public market will be a big signal for new IPO hopefuls, guys.
Well, we've been waiting for IPOs. Now we know how to say it. And I guess if you're going to go public, you should be a chip competitor to NVIDIA on AI. Thank you, Seema.
Seema, thanks.
Everybody that you come in contact with, and I mean everybody, says to you, oh, you're in the investment business. What do you think about NVIDIA? And they're people who have no idea what NVIDIA is.
I feel like, don't you feel like that's cooled down a little bit?
Yes, but that's good. That is healthier for the market. It's
Fervor
like
about
saying
all that
GameStop. It's like we should all own GameStop because we heard it from the person cutting our hair. I don't think so. So it's the same dynamic. You have to have something broader, and the professionals who are buying these stocks, I mean, we know the companies we're buying. It's not just the S&P index that's moving higher. It's other buying in addition to it.
I'm not suggesting we're not going to have NVIDIA earnings watch parties anymore because they're still going to be a thing, but it does feel like a little bit of the fervor about that has cooled a bit, which is good. I mean, you make the argument that that's good. Now, you know, outside of the mega caps, you do have the filing of an IPO by a chip maker. It's Cerebras. Maybe they'll take on NVIDIA. The latest funding round valued that company $4 billion. Backers include Sam Altman, Coatue, Altimeter, Benchmark, plans to go public in the NASDAQ. I don't know. B of A today says the highest owned semis still are relatively underweight, if you want to believe that. Steph, what do you make of that? That the highest owned semis are still relatively underweight.
I know I am.
Well, yeah, but that's what happens when you're at 8% of the S&P, you know, or 6%, 6.5% with NVIDIA and whatever it is, 2% with Broadcom. That's 10% in two names, close to. I mean, you can't be overweight. Otherwise, you only have 6 stocks in your portfolio.
So that's not. That stat is not telling of
not relevant.
An opportunity that exists. Yeah. That's how it's being painted.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting, actually. I mean, I've been adding to Broadcom and Lam Research on the kind of the declines, if you will. They're volatile stocks. You get a look every once in a while, right? So I think that Broadcom, to me, is just the one that I wanted to bet on versus NVIDIA. I mean, I'm still up quite a bit in it. It hasn't done as well, but I think you can still make a lot of money. I mean, why I like Broadcom only because that their AI business certainly is growing 3 to 4-fold, right? But they also have VMware, and that actually changes the story completely in terms of software, in terms of margins and free cash flow. And so to me, that's the one I'm betting on. But I kind of like the fact that if that is in fact true, that people are underweight semis, that's not a bad sign.
Well, it's mostly because they're underweight NVIDIA. And it's like saying people are underweight Apple. Almost everybody is. Or underweight Microsoft because, again, very, very high. I get that. But if you added up everything, what would it be now? I don't know, 14% of the S&P. I don't know. It's a big number. It's hard to be overweight.
I know it's too soon for you to talk about this company specifically, but at least it raises the issue of companies that are out there that want a piece of this AI pie. How should we be thinking about these newcomers relative to the heavyweights like NVIDIA?
Yeah. So there's a number of areas of competition for NVIDIA, which makes sense. It's an enormous potential opportunity, and all the dollars right now are flowing to NVIDIA. And you've got other merchant suppliers like AMD or even Intel. You have hyperscalers doing their own products, and then you have startups as well, right? And I think for a lot of the startups, it's difficult. They don't have scale. They don't have ecosystem, and if their pitch is, we have a chip that's better than NVIDIA, I think that's hard because, with every generation, NVIDIA has a chip that's better than NVIDIA, and they have the software and all the ecosystem support that goes with it. So I'm not going to comment on Cerebras, but they're doing some other things. I mean, clearly, they're gonna try their best at this point. But in general, so far it's been a winner take all. And I always, as I've said this before, it seems like it's NVIDIA's game to lose, like more broadly.
Well, I mean, it's winner take most, right? I mean, it's not like Broadcom hasn't done well. No. The issue, though, is that, as it's done better, its multiple's gone up, hasn't it? So it's not as cheap as it was viewed to be before.
That's true. And so to be honest, if you're talking about the real competition, I actually think it is more on that hyperscaler side, the cloud vendors doing their own chips. And this is an area clearly where Broadcom really shines. They're doing a lot of the ASIC work for the key players like Google and Meta and some others. And it's a very big business for Broadcom. They said $12 billion in total AI revenues this year. I bet $8 billion of that 12 is probably custom AI accelerators and ASICs for those large guys. And look, I actually do think that is real, and it will get bigger. And I wouldn't be surprised if the penetration of ASICs relative to the broader TAM gets bigger and bigger over time. It's kind of apples and oranges in some sense. It's more, those stuff is more used for the internal workloads of the hyperscalers versus workloads where you need programmability or anything that's customer facing or enterprise. So they are kind of two different markets. But yeah, I mean, this is a market that's already sizable and it's getting bigger. But to be fair, I think that the overall opportunity, the TAM is big enough for both of them to benefit. I don't think it's a matter of one necessarily winning over the other. The market's sizable. And I like NVIDIA and I like Broadcom. We like both stocks.
I mean, but that kind of squeezes out AMD, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, this is one of AMD's like broader issues. I mean, in the near term, and by the way, they have an AI event coming up in a week or two, and we'll get some new product announcements, and we'll see. And they suggested they'll do $4.5 billion or more than $4.5 billion this year. I think expectations are probably for 5+, and I don't want to knock them too badly, because it was zero a year ago. I've said this before. So on an absolute basis, ramping up, $5 billion of a product from zero in a year is nothing to sneeze at. In the grand scheme of the dollars that are getting spent, though, it's not very big. NVIDIA will do well over $100 billion in revenue this year. Again, Broadcom's going to do double digits in total AI revenues. So it's not that big, but it's good. But long term, I mean, you bring up a good point. I understand the need for a second source, but most of AMD's exposure right now is at these larger hyperscalers. And is that second source, does it need to be the AMD or is it Broadcom? I think that's an open question at this point, yeah?
Two quick ones before I let you run. What's the outcome, the end game, whatever you want to call it, for Intel? What happens here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, they've kind of bet the company now that their 18A, their next generation process that they call 18A, and they're betting the company on its success. And so that's I guess what we're waiting for. And if it is truly successful, maybe you could see a revitalization. They bring a bunch of, they're outsourcing a lot of stuff to TSMC right now. It's killing their margins. You bring the stuff back in, the margins get better. Ideally, it's a better process so they can take back market share and they can charge more because they're better products, and it gives customers a lot of confidence to put a lot of foundry volume there. And that's how you kind of build to the targets that they put out there for 2030. And keep in mind, it's only 2024 right now. There is a lot of wood to chop, though, between now and then. And if that process does not knock it out of the park, if it's not successful, then, there are some more severe scenarios that may come to play. And to be clear, I don't think they're desperate at this point. We made this point before. I think given the OPEX cuts and the CAPEX cuts and the dividend suspension and the government funds and the private equity funds that they've gotten, I think their cash position is okay. So I don't think they're desperate. They don't need to make any crazy moves, but they probably got a year, 18 months, like to see if 18A really holds muster or not. And if not, then there are more severe scenarios that may come to mind.
What about Qualcomm, quickly?
Yeah, I like Qualcomm. The only issue with the stock is there is an Apple overhang, and it's looking maybe more likely. They've already suggested people that kind of by the end of 26, the Apple business mostly goes away. And it's looking like they may lose potentially some more of it next year. Now, that being said, with the stock trading right now, it's a roughly low 20s multiple on next year's number, even if there was no Apple in it. And my own opinion is by the time Apple is gone, if Apple leaves, which would be fiscal 27, I think they're doing $10 plus. So I at that point, even without Apple. So I think you just need to sort of clear the Apple overhang and the stock can work. In general, smartphones are not great, but they've kind of bottomed. And I'm getting more positive on the content opportunities, if not necessarily on the units for AI smartphones. And there is a diversification story that's kind of slow, but it is building. They got an analyst day coming up in November. So we like the stock.
All right, good stuff. Covered a lot. Stace, thanks as always. Stacey Rascon.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, I hope you're all doing well and staying calm on this crazy day in the markets. So today, just about the entire market was red, with the S&P closing the day down about 0.9%. NVIDIA closed the day down nearly 3.7%, and Tesla finished the day down nearly 1.4%. I want to talk about the markets, NVIDIA and Cerebras. I'll just briefly say about Tesla. Keep an eye out for delivery numbers tomorrow morning. The consensus estimate is around 462,000 vehicles delivered in Q3. I'm not sure what to expect from this report, but hopefully the numbers are good. I noticed that NIO, BYD, XPeng, and Li Auto all reported good delivery numbers in China, so that does bode well for Tesla tomorrow. If Tesla trades lower following delivery numbers, then I would be looking for the stock to find a bottom and then trade higher from that bottom the closer we get to October 10th, as long as the rest of the market simply remains calm during that time. Speaking of the rest of the market, today was a crazy day with multiple negative events happening. We have the port strikes all across the East and Gulf Coast. We have escalation in the Middle East, and we also got some bad economic data this morning. All of these events, combined with the seasonality of October for the stock market, caused stocks to trade lower today. Hopefully the port strikes are resolved soon, and hopefully the situation in the Middle East improves. For right now, though, everyone is kind of on edge until we have more clarity on both situations. The port strikes affect literally every industry in at least some way: autos, materials, construction, commodities, food, retail, etc. So hopefully a deal is reached soon between union workers and employers. Otherwise, this could get really bad really quick. All right, now let's talk about Cerebras, because I think this is very interesting. So Cerebras is being led by multiple former executives of C-Micro. C-Micro was acquired by AMD back in 2012, and Cerebras claims to have a chip that rivals NVIDIA's at a lower cost. Now that is a big claim to make, and I'll be honest, I seriously doubt that this will be major competition to NVIDIA at this point in time. NVIDIA provides enterprise with an entire ecosystem. It's not just the chips, it's the rack and the wiring and the cooling, a ton of software and so forth. And many companies would much rather go with NVIDIA so that they don't have to deal with all of those additional factors. But at the same time, demand for NVIDIA's products is outstripping supply, and many companies simply cannot get the NVIDIA GPUs that they need. And because demand is so great right now, I think there is a place in this current market environment for competitors. Looking at Cerebras S1 filing, the company is not currently profitable, but their loss in 2023 was 28% less than it was in 2022, which is a very good improvement. Additionally, Cerebras revenue in 2023 more than tripled from what it was in 2022. So here's the thing. I like the idea of investing in a company like this in its early stages because there is so much upside potential in the future. And given the company's small size relative to giants like NVIDIA and AMD, it is very plausible for a company like this to see year-over-year revenue growth in the triple digits, which is very attractive. Here's the major problem, though. I expect this IPO to be severely overpriced when the company goes public. I do not like buying stocks immediately after an IPO because company executives and underwriters often take these companies public at overinflated valuations because they make more money by doing so. So that is the dilemma here. After Cerebras goes public, I want to wait for a while and let things calm down. After that, I would seriously consider establishing a position in this company. Now, this company is completely different from NVIDIA. NVIDIA is decades ahead of Cerebras and is very much profitable. So NVIDIA is definitely the safer investment in my opinion. At the same time, year-over-year revenue growth in the triple digits on a percentage basis in a company that is producing AI chips is very attractive. So we'll see what happens. Now about NVIDIA. I am bullish on the long-term future of NVIDIA, but as I've been saying for a while now, I am cautious about adding to NVIDIA until November 1st. There are multiple reasons for this. The pattern the market moved in during mid to late October in both 2016 and 2020, and also the typical cycle NVIDIA moves in between earnings. Prior to NVIDIA's last two earnings reports, the stock reached a relative low about 3 to 5 weeks prior to the company's next earnings report. This time, that would be sometime in late October/early November. And back in 2016 and 2020, the market traded lower during mid to late October and reached a relative low on the Friday before the week of the election. This year, that would be November 1st. With these two patterns in mind, the pattern the market followed during the last two election cycles, and the pattern NVIDIA typically moves in between earnings, I am cautious about adding to NVIDIA and cautious about the rest of the market until November 1st. During the week of the election, I think it is possible for NVIDIA to begin trading higher in anticipation of the company's next earnings report. I think this is likely given Micron's great earnings report last week, and also the fact that Blackwell revenue should start to show up in NVIDIA's next quarter guidance. We're expecting $3 to $4 billion in Blackwell revenue in Q4. So if NVIDIA guides Blackwell revenue higher than $3 or $4 billion in their next earnings report, then I think the stock would likely trade higher on that news. In the immediate term, I have no idea what to expect because anything could happen. And I think in the very near term, NVIDIA's price action will be largely dependent on what happens with the rest of the market. If we get news that an agreement has been reached between dock workers and employers, then the markets will likely move higher on that news. But we also have to pay attention to the situation in the Middle East. If there is additional escalation in the region, then that will weigh down heavily on markets. From a long-term perspective, I am bullish on the future of NVIDIA, and I think the company's brightest days are ahead. As long as nothing unexpected happens with Taiwan or hyperscalers' capex spending on AI, then I think NVIDIA should be just fine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. Demand for NVIDIA's products is increasingly strong. New product cycles are on the way, and Blackwell should begin shipping in Q4. So all in all, I am bullish on NVIDIA for the next 1 to 2 years, and I would not be surprised if this company doubles over the next 2 years given NVIDIA's current growth trajectory and upcoming product cycles. At least that's how I see it. With all of that being said, I hope you all have an amazing rest of the day. Remember to stay calm in these markets and do not make any irrational decisions. And with that, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.